In the next activity, Your Shakespeare Stuff, we want you to share some of your experiences with Shakespeare and his work. Shakespeare has become such an industry, and it's quite likely that you have had an experience with his work already. You may have a favourite quote or something at home that is related to Shakespeare himself or to one of his plays. It could be your first memory of Shakespeare or an edition of his plays sitting in your bookshelf, or even a textbook you studied at high school. It could be a Hollywood movie version of one of the plays, a costume you wore in a school performance of Shakespeare, or something more unusual like some Lady Macbeth guest soap for your bathroom. Out, damned spot! To start you thinking about this activity, I'd like to share with you some of the Shakespeare stuff that I've collected over the years. Most of these objects have a story attached to them about my experiences with Shakespeare's work. My first experience with Shakespeare's work was in Year 10, when I was about 15 years old, and I had my first encounter with a Shakespeare play. It was Julius Caesar. The very first thing our teacher asked us to do was to choose one of two speeches by Mark Antony. As homework, we had to memorise our chosen speech and speak it the next day in front of the class. I still remember today the speech I chose. I was hooked, and Shakespeare was my guy. Since then, I've remembered many Shakespeare quotes and speeches and collected tons of Shakespeare stuff, like this fabulous insult tea towel. Great for starting conversations at dinner time. I also like this Shakespeare rubber ducky. It means I can relax with Shakespeare in the bath. In terms of Shakespeare jewellery, I love this ring. It has an inscription on it in French which says, "Think of me, God willing." It is a replica of a ring found during a dig at the Rose Theatre in London. This was a theatre in Shakespeare's time. They found quite a few personal items during that excavation, including hairpins and buttons as well as this ring. Today you can see these in the Museum of London. Over the years I've also collected many editions of his plays. This impressive looking 3-volume set was given to me by my parents as my 16th birthday present, when it became clear to them that Shakespeare was obviously going to be a very important part of my life. This edition is quite rare. As you can see, it's called The Children's Shakespeare, and it was published around 1940. It's really interesting as it's intended for children, and so the editors had censored it. They were especially keen to get rid of all sexual references, of which there are many in Shakespeare's plays. This is particularly notable in Antony and Cleopatra, which is about a famous historical love affair. Look how short the play is in this edition when all the sexual references are removed. These are the editions that I set for my students, which are produced by the Royal Shakespeare Company. If you wanted to buy a Shakespeare play, this is the edition I would recommend. Each play has a very accessible introduction, and there is a scene-by-scene analysis which you can read quickly to get an idea of the play's plot. My favourite edition is this one called The Riverside Shakespeare. It has all the plays in one volume, and while that's handy, I like it because one of my dogs ate some of the introduction when she was a puppy. You can see here where she thought it was the most tasty. Dogs like Shakespeare too. Some other unusual objects that I've come across are this plague rat hand puppet. In Shakespeare's time, the theatres in London were often closed because of the plague. Rats are carriers of the fleas that transmit the plague to humans, but not this guy. He's nice and clean, and he's our mascot for the Shakespeare course. This tiny Hamlet is my absolute favourite. Apparently the whole play is here, but I haven't actually checked. I like it for the face of Shakespeare and for the little clasp that stops any loose pages escaping. It keeps Hamlet safe and intact. Now that you have heard about some of my experiences and seen some of my Shakespeare stuff, see what items related to Shakespeare you can find in your bookcases, kitchen cupboards, or elsewhere. If you don't have any Shakespeare stuff, and not everyone does, rattle your brains for a Shakespeare quote or first experience with Shakespeare's work that you can remember. It could be from school, a theatre production of a Shakespeare play, a movie of a Shakespeare play. Post photos of your Shakespeare stuff and or of your Shakespeare quote or memory. Then have a look at what others have posted and vote for your favourites. Who's got the best Shakespeare stuff? Let's find out. I look forward to seeing your posts in the discussion forum.